let's bring Barnes in because we got some stuff to talk about. And Barnes is looking dapper as always. Robert, how goes the battle?
Good.
So you're back at home now.
Yes. There's an empty trial house sitting in Kenosha, Wisconsin, by the lake. It's beautiful. If anybody wants a time of year up there, it's a little cold, but it turned out that I'm not there, nor is anyone else, thanks to the efforts of some of the people around Kyle Rittenhouse and his family, not Kyle himself. But yeah. So yeah, back in Vegas, it is warmer here.
Well, here's the question, and sometimes I'm nervous because I'm not sure what I can ask you, but you're a big boy. You'll tell me if you can't talk about it. What can you talk about in terms of what went down with Rittenhouse and what's going forward by way of trial?
Sure. So when I got involved, certain assurances were made by the team of people around Kyle and his mother, and that was one that that Wendy Rittenhouse would be the legal, operational, and signatory control of everything related to the fundraising and the funds and the expenditures concerning those funds. I was given assurances that had already happened back in March of this year. In addition, as it was clear that the people running his public relations, running his marketing, running his social media accounts were incompetent at what they were doing, particularly a gentleman by the name of David Hancock, who had no experience or skill in this. His Free Kyle USA Twitter account, I think, still only has 5,000 followers.
Which is inconceivable, by the way. I mean, it's inconceivable.
Completely. The guy has no clue what he's doing. It's either deliberate sabotage or just utter incompetence and ego. That he would be replaced by a very sophisticated team of people with like Hollywood marketing skills, a high-end all people that I arranged the contacts and communications and referrals to. I vouched for all of this because my only concern was getting Kyle the best defense in the court of public opinion, the best defense in the court of law. I didn't care about anything else. And so that was my sole and whole focus. That is why for the entire time that I've worked for Kyle, I've spent a lot of money, both in time and actual out-of-pocket costs, over well in the six figures, and have never billed he or his family a penny, nickel, dime, or dollar.
And now, if I can ask, or if you can answer, like the team that you were putting together, star-studded team, can you disclose?
Part one was the operational control. All go to Wendy. Part two, I'll make the referrals and made the referrals. And I mean, I had people, I convinced people to, who's had family members on their deathbeds to go out and help Kyle and to make sure things got done and put the whole team, Kyle's whole team up there in connection with them. They said they were going to hire him, retain him, get everything done, all the rest. Then part three. My view was there should have been full replacement of the legal defense team. Mark Richards talks about trying over 100 cases. He doesn't talk about winning a single one. I talked to people that are around them that knew them. I know a lot of people in Wisconsin. People don't know I graduated from Wisconsin Law School. I got a lot of close connections with a lot of high-ranking defense attorneys in Wisconsin. I first went public about Lynn Wood and John Pierce because I was hearing from Wisconsin lawyers who were very concerned about how the defense was going. And so I put together a team that ideally could be the defense at trial, but at a minimum would be the advisory council. These included several lawyers, including, I won't disclose their names yet because I don't have that, I'm not sure if they would be okay with that fully, but they'd all agreed to help, didn't demand any upfront payment. And I'm talking two lawyers who had more self-defense wins than any lawyers in the country, lawyers who literally wrote the book on self-defense, two lawyers who were intimately involved on the ground in Wisconsin, two street-level lawyers who've done street criminal cases across the country, and that's the kind of skill set you need to add in, and two high-profile lawyers who handle high-profile criminal cases, plus myself and another. So it's about an advisory team of 10 lawyers that was going to be better than the OJ Dream Team defense. And then for the jury selection, brought in, and again, got these people to, just on my word, agree to come in without demanding any upfront advance payment at all, any guarantee of payment at all. And this included three different top data people, one of whom is said he can disclose it, Richard Barris, one of the best in the country. All of them stepping in. Richard Barris had already done extensive polling at my expense for Kyle to know everything that was going on in Kenosha, everything that was, venue transfer issues, jury selection issues, you name it, identified 17 different risk factors for Kyle's prospective jurors, figured out that the jury pool was very contaminated by media publicity caused by prosecutor Binger. Almost 2/3 of Kenosha jurors presumed Kyle guilty. People watched the jury selection today. They saw evidence of that. And not only that, so 3 different data sources, data vendors, because the juror information was available more than a week before trial. So you could go through all 150 jurors and find out key detailed pieces of information. I know they didn't find it because they asked the same questions that were available in the data today that you could have got in the data. And instead, they just gave away some of their best jurors to the prosecution by publicly asking that question to the questionnaire. But not only that whole team of people that had set aside time, because I was promised and guaranteed 2 weeks ago that all of this was protected, all of this was agreed to, all of this was not a problem. So everybody could lock in their time, set aside their schedule, and this is substantial expense. On top of that, the best body language experts in the world, and the people out there can guess who they are, had agreed also to assist and were flying in and setting aside time to be there in the courtroom to observe whether jurors were telling the truth or not, whether they might be trying to hide something, whether they may be because that was the second key component. The first key component was the data analysis. The second key component was the in-person body language reporting.
And by the way, now that I've gotten sufficiently through the 6-minute X-ray of Chase Hughes, I'm just mentioning that because it's a book I'm reading. I can tell you, like, you can appreciate the application of what they can determine, what they can read into jury, because the thing is this: those books are useful for people who are going to use it in everyday life. When the people that you are trying to get information from, deduce certain things from, don't know that it's going on. So it's extremely useful on a practical day-to-day level, not necessarily like setting up one expert against another to see who can outsmart the other, just daily application of this, especially in trial. And knowing what's going on now with the Kyle trial, with jury selection, with how this could be used to determine things that the jury members are saying and are not saying body language wise. Read the book, people, and it's immensely useful, and you can see the practical application it can have here. So sorry to interrupt you with that, just so that everybody understands the value that they were bringing to the table.
Oh, absolutely. You're talking about over 100 years of collective experience of the best in the world body language experts all coming to the defense of Kyle Rittenhouse and made available to him, on top of the data team, on top of the jury selection team. That's what's put together. I book houses, book travel, book transportation, set aside time, you name it. Vouch, my name is used to vouch and save and raise more than $600,000 for Kyle Rittenhouse's defense. I got Lynn Wood to agree to set aside $1 million of the bail fund, at least $1 million of the bail fund, to cover any other legal or security and other personal family expenses necessary to make sure the trial goes correctly and adequately.
Barnes, I'm going to bring this up. Let me read this one, Robert, because it's a good question. Bex Fire, is it that Kyle's attorney secretly want to sink him, or are they afraid that Barnes and his team would steal their thunder? It just doesn't make sense. After all this, explain to us who is left on the team, and what does the team consist of? How many lawyers? How many experts that you know of? And what's the strategy? But sorry.
So basically, early last week, when everybody's up there, everybody's on the way there. If they aren't already there. I'm suddenly told by Mark Richards that not only will they not share any information, they won't allow any of us in the courtroom for jury selection, and they won't be taking any advice from anybody. And it's like, I write back and I'm like, why not? I mean, you don't have to do anything with the advice. I'm not demanding you get replaced. I'm just saying, why not have that advice available to you? And it said, no, refused, just outright. Try to reach out to talk to Kyle and his mom, and I'm told that can't meet with him unless this guy, David Hancock, is there in the room. This security guy who's basically hijacked and kidnapped the family functionally. I find out, this is how all this, I think, happened. Around the same time in the weeks leading up, there is a lawsuit filed that I'm the registered agent for the Milo Fund, which is the fund that is the fundraising fund. And I'm concerned by the allegations raised in the suit. The allegations in the suit are, it's $1 million plus claim against the Milo Fund. It claims that this guy, David Hancock, is secretly running it all, that he's basically in control of the family finances, control of the Milo Fund. I have, and all the things that I had been told had been corrected back in February. Now I have to wonder whether it's true. So I just asked for real simple information. I said, I want just give me the audited financials and that this had been promised to me all along anyway, that once it was available would be forthcoming and was supposed to be available by early October. And the legal documentation showing that, in fact, Wendy Rittenhouse is the owner of the fund, is the trustee, is the signatory. And suddenly that's unavailable. And then a few days later, suddenly I'm out. And suddenly everybody else is excluded. And no one else, and nobody can help. And I mean, no better way to hijack a kid than to be his sole source of food, his sole source of groceries, his sole source of housing, his sole source of utilities, sole source of medicine for he and his family.
Sole source of security as well, because that I suspect is the number one concern above all else.
Correct. So it's his security guy, this David Hancock guy. It was his idea to bring in Lynn Wood. It was his idea to bring in John Pierce. It was his idea to ambush Kyle with militia members of the Proud Boys members at a bar that Kyle had no clue who they were or what they're about. And the question is what that person asks. Is this deliberate sabotage of Kyle's defense? Is it ego? What is it? I thought it was so irrational that nobody could do this. Even if their goal was money or something else, Kyle gets convicted, that their opportunities go away. So I thought everybody was aligned. I didn't care about the money. I didn't care about the ego. If they wanted to fire me and tar and feather me, go have at it. Just make sure Kyle has the best available defense. And so when they were like, we won't allow anybody else in the room. So based on the questions asked today, we gave them tons of great information about what were the key areas of risk for Kyle. And for those that don't understand this, the problem is the right lives in its own echo chamber of its own accord. The most people in Kenosha have been bombarded by false media stories from the local media affiliates and the local newspapers, but particularly the TV affiliates, and that has gone through their social media, and they have a false news narrative about Kyle. That's why you heard jurors talking about, didn't he have a machine gun? Didn't he come from Chicago? I mean, things that are utterly false. Worried about him because they think he's somehow dangerous. This is a kid who was just out to protect a small business, who if he wasn't there that night, a gas station gets burned down and God knows how many people die. I mean, the kid's a sweetheart. The mom's a sweetheart. The whole family are sweethearts. But they're a poor family that I don't think is getting the best legal advice. And so now all I know of with the jury selection is what I saw in court. And based on the questions being asked, they clearly did not take advantage of the information that Richard and I and others had provided to them, because they're asking questions about gun ownership and other things that would have been available if you would have done your data research correctly. I don't think they replaced it. I don't think they replaced the people we had with anybody. I think there's like one or two people that are helping them out on the jury selection side that are not well equipped for these kind of cases. Richards himself is a liberal Democrat, is not well suited for a gun Second Amendment case, doesn't have a reputation of winning. Talks about over 100 jury trials, doesn't talk about a single one he's ever won. So, and if people, I got bombarded today with text and emails saying, what the heck's going on with jury selection? Some of these questions are terrible. The follow-up is awful. That's because my whole team is not there. So, people knew the dream team. They basically used me saying, hey, promising me, hey, well, we're going to make sure the dream team is available for Kyle so that I would go out and raise funds for Kyle's defense to make sure he was secure, and then turned around and gutted all that. It's borderline, if not actual legal malpractice by Mark Richards, in my view.
The people are asking how it can happen. What would you have done differently? And it's something we've been discussing from the very beginning, is that you cannot go solicit a mandate from a client. They have to come to you. They have to call you. And call it strategizing. You were strategizing one way or the other to get the team together so that the resources were there. Yep. The lawyers on the ground. How many lawyers on the ground?
So now, to my knowledge, there's 2, maybe 3 lawyers on the ground. Mark Richards and a lawyer from Madison, and an associate of Mark Richards, my understanding. And then one person to help with the jury, as far as I know, and that's it. I don't know if they did any data work at all. By the nature of their questions, they didn't take so. And at this point, what the data show, here's the other issue: if the judge would have known what he saw today in advance, that 2/3 of the Kenosha likely jury pool presumed Kyle guilty because of the media misrepresentations about the case. I believe the judge would have allowed much more extensive written and other voir dire, so that it would have filtered that out to make sure that only people who presume Kyle innocent are on that jury pool. If we had been allowed to run the jury selection, I had no doubt there was zero chance of a conviction of Kyle, period. There might have been a mistrial, but there never would have been a conviction because we knew exactly who the risk factors were. We had all the people there to make sure that people didn't, we didn't have a Chauvin juror who, misrepresented the facts to get on there. We were going to be in equipped position to make sure that did not happen. And so forth. And so I don't have any confidence. So, I mean, and I can't at this point vouch for the fundraising organization because none of the information has been forthcoming that I've requested over the last several weeks. And again, I was suddenly punitively pushed out. Everybody else was pushed out at the same time that this information was supposed to be forthcoming. I assume there's probably a connection between the two.
The money that was raised was to serve as defense costs, literal like legal defense and physical defense, and all of that. Do we know who has access to that money? Like who gets to sign off on how that's disposed of?
That's what's unclear. I asked for clarification on that information because I'd been led to believe it was Wendy Rittenhouse, and the nature of the lawsuit filed against the fund suggests it's not Wendy Rittenhouse. Suggests instead it's this David Hancock fellow who's got a very shadowy, shall we say, spooky past, in more ways than just Halloweenish.
And there's hundreds of thousands of dollars in that fund that was raised.
Oh yes. I mean, my understanding was at least 650,000 had been raised. We don't know if more has been raised. We don't know. I don't know everything. Because again, all I asked for was proof of what happened, and they said it was they was almost finished. It was coming, and then all of a sudden, when it was due, suddenly, we really can't have you around anywhere. We can't have any of the people around. We can't have anybody but this team around. And like, if you're Mark Richards, what's your grounds for this? Like there's some decisions that are client decisions and there's some decisions that are lawyer decisions. Jury selection is a lawyer decision because your client's not in a position to know what's a good jury select, any of that. That's not their skill set. Their position is, do I plead? Do I not? That's within their control. Do I testify? Do I not? That's within their control. What is not within their control are things that are outside of their knowledge, outside of their understanding. And so why did Mark Richards turn down a dream team of advisory counsel, a dream team for jury selection, dream team for investigative work? What logic would be behind turning that down unless there's some sort of problem he doesn't want me stumbling into?
Yeah, or they want the glory. They expect this to be a slam dunk without you.
I hope they get it. I hope they can take all the glory. I'd made that clear to all of them. I don't care about. I've been through enough high-profile cases. I don't need any more. So I was happy they could take all the credit. I had zero problem with that. And that's the part that I don't understand. I mean, it was like we could be in the background. The only reason why I was publicly talking about the dream team jury selection is because it was a key to helping Kyle raise funds to pay everyday security and legal costs. That's why. Otherwise, there's no reason for me to talk about it until the case is over. So it was done on his behalf that was even discussed. So that could be it, but that quite doesn't honestly make a lot of sense, frankly. But it's possible. You have lawyers with big egos who don't want anybody to help and participate. But normally if you have a big ego, it's because you deserve it in a certain context. In other words, if you've won a lot of cases, not when you're known for losing lots of cases. Like Mark Richards.
Confession through projection goes both ways, Robert. So when you say that, the big ego, which some people might accuse some people of having, can be warranted, can be earned, or can be totally unjustified.
A lot of good criminal defense lawyers do have huge egos. So, I've been around plenty of them. I've dealt with it 100 times. It always baffles me, frankly, but to a certain degree. I mean, if you can use, I always welcome help. I welcome help from ordinary, everyday people, no matter the circumstance. I like it on the locals board. One of the people on the locals board made a fair point that given how much they were using my reputation to raise funds, I probably should have been more aggressive earlier. But my whole focus was defending Kyle. And as long as we got the jury selection people in, I could cross this bridge down the road. I just cared about the kid being found innocent because he is innocent. The family being secure because they deserve to be secure. My concern was not money, was not ego, was not anything else. And I obviously ran into people whose motivations are different than what I can understand. Maybe they have some explanation that I don't understand that is professionally explicable or whatnot.
Maybe they think you're a political liability and they don't want you as part of the team. I could think of reasons. Well, they say we
Yeah.
want to be polite to Barnes. He represented Alex Jones. We don't need that type of baggage going into Kenosha. I could think of something along those lines. Just going to read a word of Mark.
I was willing to step back. I mean, they asked me to go to public. In fact, a lot of this was precipitated because they were people on this David Hancock guy in particular was enraged that I didn't use the Tim Pool Timcast and didn't hijack it to yell at Tim Pool the whole time about whatever it is his personal grievances about John Pierce being on Tim Pool once, which I didn't think that was productive on the eve of trial. And at the same time, and also to go off on other things, Tim Pool's been a critical ally, one of the few big platform allies of Kyle's defense. So that was patently inappropriate in my view. I didn't feel overly comfortable promoting the fundraising when I had big questions that had not yet been answered by the time of the show from earlier in the week. And in addition, I didn't want to do anything to rock the judge's boat because he was going to issue rulings on Monday, which I thought could be very favorable to Kyle. This was this past Monday, and there was no reason to do anything that would rattle that cage. And that proved right because the judge issued a lot of rulings that were very favorable to Kyle this past Monday.
So actually, before we get into that, a lot of people have been asking, what can people do? I say above and beyond, share this and hope that it gets to the family somehow so they know what their alternatives are if they have not been made aware of them. And so they can hear both sides and make their own decisions to the extent they still can make their own decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I think, pray. I mean, to be honest with you, that's about all right now. Watch the trial, see what you can learn from it either way in terms of things about trials in general. I think it's healthy if Mark Richards and David Hancock and others know that the world is watching. So there better not be any other tactical decisions that look like sabotaging Kyle, that they better be given honest advice, not bad advice. That if Kyle gets convicted from their malpractice, they're going to, face legal consequences for that. So I think that's, I thought about saying nothing. That's always a possibility in this circumstance. And I went back and forth and talked to ethics professors, talked to high-ranking ethics people. What can I do? What am I allowed to do? What am I not allowed to do? And I've tried to stay neatly within that. My overarching focus is still that Kyle get acquitted. I hope he does. And I hope the people that are doing his defense, maybe they did things for ego reasons and not sabotage. But if they have any bad motivations, they better put those aside because the world is watching.
Excellent. And now I guess, if nothing else, thanks for all the help you've done and the information you've taught us. I mean, people will armchair Monday morning quarterback all day long and say you should get something in writing, yada, 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 whatever. I think you've done good, and you've done good selflessly, which is more good than good.
Well, before we get into the meat of the Rittenhouse cases, it was this David Hancock fellow who kept asking me not to be part of the January 6th cases all the way back to January. Neither Kyle nor his mom made that request. So I respected this team of people saying that. But now that I am out of representing Kyle and nothing I do after that can be reflected on him in any way, shape, or form, I have reached out to Matt Brainerd, and I am going to start getting involved in those January 6th cases to help those defendants because I've sat on the sidelines for that long enough. And I don't know if that was somebody's ulterior agenda or not to keep me out, but if it was, it didn't work for long. And I'll be happy to help coordinate some legal strategies and ideas because I think a lot of those people have also been railroaded in the criminal justice process.
You said something earlier that the lawyer, Mark Richards, the lawyer on the ground, was do you say a classic liberal or a liberal Democrat? I forget what word you used.
I mean, his reputation, and I think he told me that too. He's a liberal Democrat. And it's just nothing against liberal Democrats. It's just this is a kind of case that I don't think a liberal Democrat is best equipped to handle, to understand what some of the issues are. They may misconstrue and misinterpret them. And by some of the questions I saw in jury selection today, they had that hallmark to them, sadly.
And just so nobody thinks that that's a political jab, because that could go one way or the other. Maybe in Kenosha, what you want to have is a liberal Democrat as a lawyer, so they're more friendly with the community, and therefore, don't come in as brashly or as negatively viewed as, say, someone who has, Robert Barnes, who has defended Alex Jones. Maybe that works. Maybe you do need someone like Robert Barnes, who is, wouldn't be qualified as a liberal Democrat to come in and just put the screws to the machine. So that could go either way. I'm not trying
by the way, my own view was not for me to replace him. My own view was to have lawyers who've won self-defense cases be the lead, and I would just assist in whatever way they wanted me to assist. There, not there, public, private, don't care. That was what I had promoted, because it makes no sense for Kyle to be defended by a couple of lawyers that, to my knowledge, have never won a self-defense case in their lives, that, to my knowledge, haven't won a high-profile case in their lives, that, to my knowledge, are not known for winning, period. When Kyle was in a position where he could have had people who literally wrote the book on self-defense be his lead counsel. I think he's been ill-served by, I think, primarily David Hancock, who's basically handpicked his lawyers for him, and even to the point of controlling communications, not allowing him to communicate with people unless he approves. It's insanity. What's taking place.
I'm going to read this one. Kyle must win. It will lead to a cascading effect of DAs politicizing self-defense. God help us all then. Providence willing. Both of your work will help Kyle, and hopefully the country will help heal Kyle, and hopefully the country as a result. And by the way, as I see God Help Us, then I just want to say everyone should go out there and listen to God Help Us All by 5 Times August, because it's a glorious song. So Robert, no, the rulings, the substantive rulings that came down last.
Great rulings by a good old school judge who's a no-nonsense judge. We read him right from the very get-go. I knew of his reputation. I knew very, very well from a wide number of lawyers who've been in front of him and dealt with him. He's usually not a pro-defense judge. But I think he saw this case for what it was from the get-go. Former state prosecutor probably thought, I wouldn't have brought this prosecution. That he understood the lawlessness that occurred that night. That what they accused Kyle of is what the other people who attacked Kyle that night were guilty of. Kyle isn't the one with a criminal record. The people who attacked him and attacked Kenosha that night were. Kyle isn't the one that's from really outside of town. They made a big deal of cross-state borders. That's a bedroom community in Illinois, right across about 10 minutes from downtown Kenosha. It's like Alexandria is a D.C. suburb of D.C. Calling it somehow from crossing state lines from Virginia into be idiotic. People in Kenosha know that. That was just a national talking point to smear the kid. But the kid was from Kenosha, knew people from Kenosha, helped Kenosha, worked in Kenosha, had close friends in Kenosha, is from a working class family, longstanding working class family. A mama who works 80 hours a week kind of working class family, doing nurse work. Kid who grew up trying to choose between being a cop and a nurse. That's who he was. That tells you a lot. His primary objective in life, protection, protect people, help people. It's not authority. It's not power, right? I mean, you don't want to become a nurse if you're an authoritarian. You don't want to become a nurse if you're driven by power. You want to become a nurse if you want to help people, protect people, heal people. That's why he went out there with his medical kit and was bragging about it to everybody. I got my medical kit, rushing into trouble, trying to help people everywhere he can. That night, he was the one who helped stop them from multiple attempts by rioters and looters and arsonists and criminals and sociopaths who invaded Kenosha that night in order to wage war on Kenosha that night under the guise of political protest, under the disguise of caring about civil rights and civil liberties. They were, in fact, no better evidence of this than the fact they were burning down and attacking Black-owned businesses, Mexican-American-owned businesses, Asian-American-owned businesses, immigrant-owned businesses. That's who they were destroying that night. It was so lawless that people moved out. You heard the jurors talking today, how everybody was terrified in the entire town. People going out and buying guns immediately because of how terrified they were. Hold down with their children inside of homes, terrified about what was going to happen. And what a 17-year-old kid did was go down and try to clean up the graffiti, try to help where he could. And people asked, because he was trained both in medicine, in ER tactics and techniques, and trained in the use of a weapon, they asked him if he could provide some protection that night so the criminality didn't invade the rest of Kenosha. And if he hadn't been there that night, it is likely that there are multiple efforts to invade the rest of the city, multiple efforts to attack a range of people that night, multiple efforts to firebomb the gas station at the center of the issues being present. And by taking a dumpster, loading it with fire and running it into the gas station, that would have exploded and caused Lord knows how many deaths. If he wasn't there that night, that's what happens in Kenosha. And because he's there, because he becomes the target of the rage of these pedophiles and sociopaths and psychopaths with a criminal record longer than my arm, and the worst kind of crimes. These aren't B&E property crimes. These aren't I'm desperate for drugs crimes. These are beating your wife, beating your kid, abusing children sexually crimes.
And B&E is breaking and entering for those who don't know. I suspect. So, yeah, no, Robert. I mean, look, listening to you talk, also, I'm hearing what would be the opening statements of a trial, which we may or may not hear. But maybe someone's watching and taking notes.
Yes, I sure as heck hope so. Prove me wrong. Prove Barnes wrong. Show how good you are. Do the best ever defense you've ever done. I hope so. I pray so. I'll be happy so. Send you some champagne, whiskey, bourbon, whatever your favorite liquor is. I only care about one thing, and that kid walking because he deserves to walk because he's innocent, and self-defense is itself on trial in America. And it's unfortunate these other people have hijacked and kidnapped it for the case for their own self-gain. But given those circumstances, the judge saw it for exactly what it was. That courthouse was attacked repeatedly over those days. I mean, they even stole the dinosaur, the cute little dinosaur, that was popular local community outside the museum. I mean, that's how sick these people were. So the judge saw it. He went up, and the key evidence was the prosecutor wanted to put the fake narrative on trial. He wanted that fake narrative that he'd been lying to the media about. The other thing is now they'll no longer represent Kyle. I no longer have to restrain myself about the prosecutor either. This prosecutor has been lying about Kyle Rittenhouse for a year, and he's been misusing and abusing bail proceedings, misusing and abusing evidentiary proceedings merely to smear and defame and libel Kyle because he knew these facts were not true. He knew it wouldn't impact the judge for bail. He knew it wouldn't impact the judge for evidence, but he knew it would impact, as you could gather from some of his comments today in jury selection, he knew it would impact the jury pool. As he almost said with a smirk, many of you, everyone in here has heard something about this case in the media. And he knows what that means. He knows a random jury. That's why he wasn't busy picking the jury list early. He looking up the info. He knows a random jury is more likely to convict than to acquit in Kenosha because of how much he's contaminated that jury pool. And so the underlying reality of the case is that when the judge has pushed back all the way through, he didn't buy the lies at the bail stage. Kyle never was a part of a militia, never knew anything with the militia, had no connection with the militia. Kyle has no connection to the Proud Boys, has nothing to do with the Proud Boys, didn't know where he was going when he was dropped off and led there by David Hancock, knew nothing about these people or these groups or these associations, doesn't have a racist bone in his body, has multiracial family members, comes from a multiracial community, he isn't a vigilante of any kind, didn't want anybody to die. He spent the first 3 weeks in jail vomiting every single day because of how distressed he was that anybody lost their life, even people who were out to kill him that night.
Well, that's the thing. And we're going to get into that because you're talking about how Kyle responded to what he did versus how Alec Baldwin is responding to what he did. We'll get there. But yeah, you remember at the beginning, this was a white supremacist attack where reflexively, even me, I thought, based on the fact that they were accusing him of being a white supremacist, surely he had to have killed some persons of color. But this is a mixed race kid who shot and killed 2 white people and injured a 3rd white person, all of whom were of the most serious types of criminality that you can imagine. But the media went with the narrative, he's a white supremacist. And then they got a hold of that picture with him doing what is now the debunked, it's been long debunked, OK symbol.
Exactly.
That was the narrative at the beginning.
That's correct. The narrative is basically Binger took the traits of the people who attacked Kyle that night and put it on Kyle. So sociopathology, criminal behavior, vigilante behavior, violent behavior, the desire of violence, all that was the people who attacked Kyle that night, who attacked Kenosha that night, because that's really what was happening. Kyle was seen as a perfect symbol of Kenosha, a nice, innocent, middle American community, still naive and idealistic about the world. And that's what enraged these pedophiles, that enraged these sociopaths, that enraged these criminals to attack him. That's why they're saying cranium the boy. That means, hey, kill him in the head. That's what's being chanted right as the people come in on him that night. So he's chased. I mean, you have Richie McGinnis, the reporter that was on the scene that saw the first shooting, said Kyle didn't jeopardize him. That other guy was jeopardizing him. He was running behind him, throwing things at him. It looked like he or somebody else was shooting at him because there were guns in the air going off right behind him. The only 2 people that got killed that night are the 2 people who grabbed the gun trying to take it away from him, which for those people out there don't know it, when you grab a gun, you ain't unarmed anymore. You're now armed. The fact you may fail to get it doesn't change the fact you are now armed. And so Contrary to what Binger said. Oh, unarmed. No, they weren't. They were grabbing guns. That makes them armed. The third guy wasn't unarmed. He had a gun. He said he wanted to empty in Kyle's head. The other guy, the people that went at him with a skateboard, that wasn't unarmed, because you try picking up a heavy skateboard. I mean, that's one of the most dangerous ways you can hurt. And I mean, that's heavy pieces of metal.
I mentioned it a couple times. I was in high school with a kid hospitalized because he got hit over the head with a skateboard in some random fight at a bank ATM. Yeah, these are obviously weapons, and anybody who paid attention knew it. Even the New York Times, which did their expose breakdown, knew it. They nonetheless prosecuted, but ran with this narrative that it was a white supremacist attack because it was a BLM protest. Necessarily, everyone who was victimized that night had to be black, when none of them were. And how many people were tainted from that initial reporting to be determined. But the ultimate outcome of the judge's ruling is that you can't refer to any of the victims, the decedents, as victims. Rather, you can refer to them by name, or apparently he can refer to them as rioters, protesters, or vandals if evidence has been adduced to justify that label. So is that
so that was one of the key, what is you've got this long litany of lies that Binger has told, the prosecutor has told the press and the public through the press, that he wanted to continue into the trial. He wanted to call these criminals, these sociopaths, these attackers, these assaulters, he wanted to call them victims merely because they were unsuccessful in their attacks and self-defense led to their harm, in some cases death. But that doesn't make them victims. And, you know, the Nazis weren't victims when we bombed them, right? You know, so in the same context, he wanted to prevent all of the evidence of their criminality from coming out about what they did that night, not just their criminal backgrounds in general, which had already been excluded, but he didn't want any record to the fact that they were trying to firebomb a gas station in the city of Kenosha and blow up a part of the city of Kenosha, which could have killed who knows how many people and caused who knows how much harm. Because, I mean, when you firebomb a gas station, just imagine what can happen. And so he didn't want, of course, the prosecutor didn't want any of that evidence to come in. Instead, he wanted to pretend that this kid just wandered into a nice little protest and ended up shooting people, knowing that that was a lie, because he has to lie in order to win. Binger has no other choice because the truth would require acquittals. And so, but what the judge recognized is, in the context of self-defense cases, there is an ancient rule that applies, which is if the person is dead, like normally in a self-defense case, you get to put all the context on trial. So basically, you think about all the things, if the person is alive, you could ask them in cross-examination about what they did that night. But what happens if they're not alive? Now, are you now not allowed to introduce the evidence of everything they did that night to contextualize why it was likely self-defense, or more likely than not, his behavior was reasonable, subjectively and objectively, because that's relevant in Wisconsin, not just subjectively relevant, but also objectively relevant. And so if you look at that, the judge was dead on right. He said the ancient rule, as Wisconsin Supreme Court has reiterated many times, including the great, very liberal Justice Shirley Abramson, but I have great respect for her, dealt with her many, many times. Didn't always agree with her, but she was an old school liberal. She believed in the law, believed in the Constitution. And what she said in a case that the judge referenced multiple times is that any question that would have been relevant to cross-examination if they were a live witness in a self-defense case is also relevant, and the mere fact that they are dead does not remove that relevance, even if Kyle didn't personally witness that behavior, because it goes to objective relevance and likely what happened that night. If I'm sitting there as a juror, I'm trying to figure out what is happening, because like Binger keeps lying to the public about this FBI drone footage, and people should ask themselves, why did the FBI hide that drone footage for almost 6 months? The FBI was doing secret drone footage of all of these BLM protests. Why haven't we all seen that? Why have they been hiding that from FOIA requests, hiding that from discovery requests? So you look at what that footage shows. Binger claims it shows Kyle chasing Rosenbaum. A bunch of gibberish, total garbage, utterly false. What happens is Kyle is just going down, trying to look at something that's happening at at one of the shops that's going on, and he is the one getting ambushed. You see Rosenbaum, you see one of these individuals go to the side, wait by the cars, wait for Kyle to go by, then get behind Kyle and chase Kyle. And again, that's part of Binger's MO. He takes everything the actual attackers did, puts it on Kyle, takes everything Kyle did, sticks it on the people that he's now calling victims. Why does Binger love pedophiles? I mean, you got to wonder about that at some level. Why does he want to protect these criminals?
Who was the Nazi propagandist? It was Goebbels, right? Who I think it was he who was attributed with having said, accuse your adversaries of doing what you are doing so as to create confusion. It is not Alinsky from the Alinsky Rules for Radicals. I looked that up. It's unclear who that it is attributed to, but it is widely accepted that Goebbels said, this is the tactic of propaganda. Just accuse your enemies of doing what you're doing because it creates confusion. And then when they say, no, I'm not doing that, you're like, oh, you're lying. That's your defense. There's no question it's going on in this case. I mean, it's for anybody who knows. And even the people who consider themselves lefties politically have to know that. But
Robert. The people that have actually done an honest breakdown of the video footage, people can just go look up, Kenosha, August 25th, see what you find. You'll find liberals from Kenosha talking about how these were outsiders, these were agitators. You'll have pro-BLM people very critical of the people who attacked Kyle that night, who said when they looked at it, it looked like as clean and straightforward as self-defense as possible. And that's what the judge is pointing out, is that, whether who's a victim in this case is exactly what's at issue. So now in closing argument, he said you can use whatever language you want, but you can't throughout trial label them victims when legally that's what's very much in question or controversy. And if they engaged in riotous behavior, arson, assault, battery, then that can be pointed out. And that's up to the defense. He said that if the defense wants to use that language, they can. That's part of their defense. That's part of their argument. So be it. The prosecution has different obligations. Their duty is to do justice. They can't. The defense's job is to be a zealous advocate for the defendant. That's our adversarial system of justice when it works correctly and works well. And Binger just wants to lie, and the judge is like, nah, I'm not going to let you get away with lots of lying in this trial.
So now Nate Brody, who I had a Twitter back and forth with, and I want everyone to understand, I like Nate, we get along, so don't read too much into our Twitter disputes, although I think I'm right. He put out a video explaining that, ultimately the judge's ruling as to not call the victims, and to allow the defense to refer to them as rioters, arsonists, whatever, looters, when the evidence is there, that is pretty par for the course. But my question is, when is the evidence sufficiently made such that the defense can then say, okay, we have enough evidence now, we get to refer to them as rioters? Like, how is that made in the context of a trial?
Well, partially it's that you can even say that you think you'll be able to prove that in opening statement based on the facts. Because again, there's differences between the prosecution is not really part of the adversarial process. The prosecution's duty is to do justice. The defendant's job is the adversarial process. Unlike anybody else, prosecutors fail to appreciate this, but their only ethical mandate is to do justice. It's not to zealously advocate for the state. It's not to zealously advocate for conviction. It is solely and wholly to do justice. That's why there's different limitations imposed on them than there is on the defense. For example, the defense can comment on a prosecution witness taking the fifth. The prosecution cannot comment on the defendant taking the fifth. That's because we have a very different system of justice. We impose a whole set of different standards on the prosecution than the defense. And that's why it's consistent with it. And his point was so that was part of his point. The other point was the issue of victimhood is in dispute. And once you come closing argument, you can make whatever argument you want. You want to call a prosecution, you want to call them a cold-blooded murder, you do what you're going to do. Defense wants to call them a bunch of rioting, arsonists, looters, they can do that too. So because that's the par for the course. But they can even talk about what criminal behavior these people were engaged in opening based on that relevant evidence to the full context of whether it was objectively reasonable, his behavior. Because that's what's important. It's not just whether it was subjectively reasonable, it's was it objectively reasonable. And for those that don't know what that means or think a subjectively reasonable is, I think what I did made sense under the circumstances. Objectively reasonable is a reasonable person would agree with me. And for that, you need to know all the facts. That's been the law forever on self-defense. And just because you died while attacking someone, it doesn't mean all of a sudden the fact that you attacked him and everything you did that night is magically irrelevant from the proceedings, like Binger tried. So that's why it was great rulings on that. I wasn't real happy with the expert ruling because, in my view, the defense should have argued for more.
What was the expert ruling?
So the prosecution, basically, their expert stunk. So their expert, and it was late disclosure, probably only could have come in under rebuttal. And so there wasn't much risk there. Defense expert, top-notch guy, came recommended by multiple people, multiple places. Originally, he was going to be testifying that on the objective reasonableness aspect under the circumstances due to his unique knowledge of geography, gunshots, self-defense, etc., which is outside of the ordinary ken of the jury. You see that when you have jurors who think Kyle had a fully automatic machine gun, like he had a gat out there or something. Or other jurors who think an AR-15 should never be legal anywhere, any place. That both of those jurors were in the jury pool. Gives you an idea for what the uphill struggle you have in Kenosha. Because Kenosha barely voted for Trump. So it's not a liberal Democratic county. It's a blue-collar labor Democratic county. A lot of people I've known growing up over my lifetime. And still have friends in Kenosha, but it's not a blue, it's not a Trump rosy red county either. And so now the venue wise, Kenosha was actually more fair than the rest of Wisconsin because of the media impact on the rest of the state. There was enough people in Kenosha that knew what happened, that were unhappy with what happened. So they were more fair than some of the other people who had no idea of the context and only believed the media lies and the Binger lies and the prosecutor lies. But so in this context, the expert I thought should have been allowed to testify to anything that relates to objective reasonableness. For whatever reason, the defense decided to restrict voluntarily his testimony to just a few areas in exchange for the prosecutor's expert not testifying, even though the prosecutor's expert was terrible and probably couldn't even go to a rebuttal. So it was just, maybe they know something I don't.
Maybe they just think it's a slam dunk of a case. They got what they needed, and now they can go do the rest on their own. And Godspeed and God bless.
I think the judge would have done a whole different jury selection had they told him, as I advised, to disclose to the judge that about 2/3 of the likely jury pool in Kenosha presumes Kyle guilty. So if he knows that, he didn't understand how bad the pretrial publicity was.
But do you do that for a change of venue, or do you what would be the objection?
Because it was worse than the rest of the state. So,
and someone had asked the question also now, can Kyle, if the judge seems fair, can Kyle now elect for a bench trial? Or
no, not unless the prosecution goes along, and there's no chance the prosecution will go along.
Yeah, now they've gotten wind to reasonable objectivity of a judge, so that ship has sailed. That's interesting. All right.
So,
Robert.
I hope he does. There's big strategic decisions upcoming. I hope we see a much better trial than we've seen than we saw in jury selection today. I hope it gets a lot better. I hope he got some, God's grace shined on that jury, and I hope the truth comes out. And at a minimum, it's a mistrial, not convictions. But I did all I could do, and that's all I can do. And I wish the kid and his mama the best of luck. And if down the road they need my help, I'll be happy to step in again and help in whatever way I can.
And it'll be easy for people to say what you should have done, could have done, what you did wrong, etc. Nothing easier. My father always said growing up, those who don't do more easily find fault in those who did than those who did and actually, knew what went into doing. So it's out there. People knew from the beginning that you were, what you were doing. Your availabilities are out there for the Rittenhouses if they so choose. And for the lawyers, maybe it's a slam dunk and they know something, or maybe it was a money grab, or maybe it's a sabotage. Who knows? I would never have ventured into the other two until I had been sufficiently, I won't say black-pilled, but red-pilled by our history together, Robert. But okay, so that's it. Now, so what this week? What comes up this week in the Rittenhouse trial?
So the jury selection, I don't know if it finished up today. I was through almost all of it. But at least the part that was publicly recorded, it looks like it may wrap up tomorrow. Again, that's way too quick in a case of this nature with the pretrial publicity this case had, with the deep political sentiments. I mean, people should listen to what some of those jurors said. They're like, there's no way we can get a verdict in this. This is going to split the country down the middle. I don't want to be publicly associated with this case. We're re-experiencing what we saw in the Chauvin case, and we know that did not produce whatever you think of Chauvin, and both of us had been critics of Chauvin. That trial did not inspire confidence in the jury process and the way that jury process was handled. And there's aspects of this where the jurors are warning everybody, hey, this is going to be hard to have an impartial jury. I think maybe the trial shouldn't have happened so fast. That was Mark Richards' choice, quite frankly. I think it's a little more time, a little more distance might have been a lot better under the circumstances. But that ship has sailed too. So it looks like my guess is the trial at this point will start Tuesday afternoon. with opening statements. We'll see how good they are. I hope the defense is good. Binger will be better than people think. Binger is a very somebody who understands the court of public opinion as well as he did, who repeatedly lied, is going to be a good narrator to the jury. So, and he'll try to get away with a lot of lies, and he may do so. So we'll see. And he presents better, frankly, from a stylistic perspective, personability perspective, for most people that I've talked to than Richards does. So hopefully we'll see a different kind of dynamic in the courtroom. Hopefully Richards knocks it out of the park and does the best he's ever done. And hopefully Kyle got, some God's blessing on that jury, and he gets acquitted and finally gets to go home and all this ends. But the rest of the trial should start Tuesday afternoon. My guess is it will last at least 2 weeks. It's scheduled for 2 to 3 weeks.
That's nuts. And just in case it wasn't clear what I said earlier, my father said, those who don't do can easily find fault in those who did, like the person picking out a typo. Oh, there's a typo here, typo there. Yeah. How about you draft something and then let someone else pick away at your typos? So that's the moral of the story. Good question. Before we move on to Baldwin, is there still any opportunity for the judge to issue a directed finding of not guilty after the prosecution rests because the state didn't meet its burden? Good question.
Yeah, a judge can issue a directed verdict. I know on Nick's show they were asking who does the sentencing as well. If hopefully that doesn't come about, but if it does come about, a judge can issue a directed verdict. This judge that's very unlikely. Even though the judge, I think, feels strongly about the case by the inclinations he's given, that he thinks this is a politically motivated prosecution, as he's not so subtly hinted at. I don't think, and I talked to a lot of the reporters up there and everybody on the ground, and they gave me a lot of great feedback as well. They don't think, but then secondly, the judge does control sentencing in Wisconsin. That's not a jury determination. Now, if Kyle is found guilty of intentional murder, it's automatic life imprisonment. There's no discretion for the judge. If he's found guilty of something lesser than that, the judge has some discretion. And the opinion is that even though this judge is known as a harsh sentencer, that under the facts of this case, he would be unlikely to do that. It's also possible for Kyle to get bail pending appeal in that instance. Could have the case. There's not a lot of easy evidentiary. It's going to be hard to show errors at this point. But we'll see, other than, legal malpractice, frankly, by the defense team. So I think the judge will dismiss the gun charge because the gun charge, he's already indicated that it's void for vagueness. I've publicly advocated that it's clearly void for vagueness. People say, oh, it's clearly illegal. He had that gun. No, it's not. The law was written to deal with handgun violence in the city of Milwaukee, not meant to take farmers' kids away from having a shotgun or rifle out on the farm. Wisconsin's a very rural state. Still to this day, 2/3 of its population live in small towns. And don't live in places with a big urban suburban counties. And so that's part one. Part two, as the judge noted, if a bunch of lawyers can't agree on what the law means, then there's no way it's not void for vagueness. It has to be void for vagueness. How's a 17-year-old kid supposed to know what the law means if the lawyers can't agree on what the law means? So I think that charge will be dismissed before goes to the jury verdict. And I think it will only be the reckless endangerment, reckless homicide, intentional homicide cases that reach the jury. And it will probably reach a jury sometime around Thanksgiving on current schedule.